Hey, good evening. Welcome again to the People's Lawctivist YouTube channel, the channel that will always keep you informed and keep you up to date about what is happening within the context of the law and activism. And I remind you all that lawctivism is primarily about using the law as a tool by which to advance an activist cause for the benefit of the people. It is absolutely critical that we emphasize that it's for the benefit of the people. Our guest tonight is none other than the renowned James Roguski. James has dedicated and committed his life to working on identifying those issues within the World Health Organization in particular that are compromising the health of the people and compromising the sovereignty of the people. And tonight we've invited James to come and talk to us, to come and give us more information about what exactly is going on as regards the international health regulations that have been amended and are supposed to come into effect on the 19th of July 2025, for as long as the countries of the world agree to them and do not either choose not to be part of it or have reservations. James is going to share with us what that means, and definitely from our perspective on the continent of Africa, we need to understand what this means to us. What do these international health regulations really speak to? And what are their implications for us as a people? Is it a trap? Is it something that is really going to work for us? James is going to help us expose this. And we are saying that if it's a trap, then Africa has to wake up. The waking up of Africa in this context goes over and above the protection of us as people on the African continent. It's not just about us as Africans, it's about humanity as a whole. And James will take us through the relationship between the health regulations and the Global Pandemic Treaty and what the way forward looks like. So now I'll hand over to James. And James, please feel free to introduce yourself briefly and go into the subject, my brother. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on board today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really not about me. It's really about the information. I've been reporting on the WHO and their negotiations for 3.5 years now. And the starting point for any kind of activism, in my opinion, has to be awareness. And so I'm going to pick a number. I'm going to make up a number. I'm going to say that 99.999% of everyone on the planet is completely unaware of the international health regulations. They were initially agreed to back literally, the negotiations happened when supposedly they were landing on the moon in July of 1969.
Oh, wow, that's
The,
far back.
the international health regulations go that far back. They were dramatically changed, amended in 2005, and then again in 2022, and then again in 2024. And so I remember the first time a number of years ago that I learned about the international health regulations. I didn't know about them when I was 9 years old in 1969. I wasn't aware of the amendments in 2005. I have been paying attention for the last couple of years. And when I first started to read them, some of the things I was like, wow, this seems pretty good. Other things is absolutely horrifying. And so, as with everything, there's a little bit of good, there's a little bit of bad. And what I want to talk about is the process by which nations got together to amend those regulations. I have an argument against many of the existing regulations.
Mm-hmm.
That's one issue. But what was amended was supposed to be in response to what happened over the last 5.5 years with COVID. But the lessons that they learned and the amendments that they adopted back on June 1st, 2024, in my view, are going absolutely in the wrong direction. They learned all of the wrong lessons.
Sorry,
So
James, before you carry on there, when you say they, I take it
they, the
that you
WHO
mean the
and
WHO. Yeah,
right.
thank you.
And the delegates from every nation who went to represent every nation's country, they did not ask the people, what do you think we should do? Do you think we should amend the international health regulations? And if so, what amendments, should there be?
Yeah. Public participation, right?
There was
Mm.
zero public participation,
Oh my
and
goodness.
the negotiations actually carried on in secret. So, a little bit of a timeline. They called for these negotiations back in December of 2021. They started the negotiations in earnest, and up until um, April of 2024, it might as well have been invisible, right? There was no like ongoing versions, there was no public comment, there was no input, there was no discussion in any kind of parliament or health ministry. The delegates that were sent, negotiated along with over 400 what they call relevant stakeholders. So there's a big long list of mostly corporations and foundations and civil society groups and so forth and so on. Your International Institute of Lawctivism, was
Yeah,
not party to those negotiations. You were not
absolutely not. Mm.
you were not given a seat at the table, nor were regular people. Okay. So
Oh
the
my
power
goodness.
brokers made these decisions. Now,
Mm.
to summarize it, all of the information that I have, I've tried to make it available on rejecttheamendments.com.
Thank you.
Rejecttheamendments.com. I'll touch on just a couple of points, maybe 2 or 3 points. They decided that the definition of relevant health products to deal with some sort of contagion or contagious disease or pandemic or whatever do not include herbs and vitamins and minerals and homeopathic remedies and indigenous treatments and natural things that were actually proven to work far better, right? Those are not included. What is included is completely all pharmaceutical products. Devices like ventilators, which in my opinion caused far more harm and death than benefit, is the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Drugs like remdesivir, which caused enormous problems. People call these things vaccines. I don't believe that what was distributed were truly vaccines, but they also added gene and cell based therapies. So, in my view of the world, being in tune with Mother Nature and doing things to keep yourself healthy is the best starting point. Altering your genes in order to protect you from the potential of a pandemic, that doesn't seem like an idea that's based on personal health. It seems like it's a high tech answer to transfer a lot of money to the companies that have that
Absolutely.
technology. Okay.
Mm.
So that's number one. Number two is the Director General already has the authority simply because he says so to declare a public health emergency of international concern. PHEIC, fake. I mean, you really can't make this
Fake.
stuff up, okay? He can declare a
True
fake.
that. Hmm.
He has an advisory emergency committee, but he doesn't have to do what they say. The World Health Assembly does not vote on it. The World Health Assembly and all of the nations do not have the ability to reject his declaration or end it. He's a totalitarian dictator in the sense that when he says, "Oh, I think there's an emergency, everybody should be afraid," there's nothing anybody can say. It's an emergency. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding. That does not mean that he can then mandate that people in every nation have to do this, that, or the other, lockdowns, jabs, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
all of the nations use the WHO's declaration as a reason for them to, on a national or provincial or state or local level, to go, oh, well, the WHO says there's an
Yeah,
emergency,
yeah, yeah.
so
We saw
we're
that.
going to
Yeah.
say there's an emergency. Well, they added to that a whole nother declaration. I call it the super fake, but they call it the pandemic emergency. If you read the definition of a pandemic emergency, you
Mhm.
realize that there's no data required. There doesn't even really have to be any deaths or, illness or anything. It's just because he says so.
Mm,
And
mm,
so
mm.
what that triggers is the fear mongering and the media, push. And the main thing that is concerning is that during the secret negotiations, there was an article that did not appear in even the last minute version up until just before they voted. Hours before they voted, they published the final document, which, by their own rules, was supposed to be given 4 months advance notice so
Yes,
everybody could look at it.
that's
Well,
right.
they were
Mm.
lucky if they gave 4 hours. It added in at the last minute that nobody had seen Article 44 BIS. And the BIS
Mm.
just means that they had to wedge it in between 44 and 45. And
Okay.
it added in what they call a coordinating financial mechanism. It's putting into the regulations the flow of money through the IHR to fund a build out of big pharma around the world. Well, the nomenclature that they use is all of the text of the existing IHR was in regular font. And any of the amendments were supposed to be put in bold font so that anyone looking through the document could see, oh, they changed this word, they added this definition, they added
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
article.
Because of the bold text. Yeah.
Well, they conveniently neglected to put Article 44 BIS in bold font. So it
Okay.
looked to the casual observer like it was always there. That wasn't an amendment, so
Mm,
don't worry
mm,
about it.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
Well, that may seem like a minor thing, but they didn't give advance notice. That didn't show up anywhere. And one of the reasons I think they did it that way is all the way back in 2023, their expert panel review committee that was chosen by the WHO to advise the WHO told them that under Article 21 of the Constitution of the WHO, you can't put monetary financing in regulations, but they did it anyways. Okay. And so the question is, do you really want billions of dollars to flow through the WHO to fund the build out of big pharma around the world to operate through the WHO, where the international health regulations say that the only relevant health products are pharmaceutical products?
Mm-hmm,
No
mm-hmm.
drug, no herbs, no vitamins, no minerals, no remedies,
Yeah.
none of that sort of thing. Even in the face, when you go on the WHO's website and you look at their COVID statistical record,
Yeah.
several orders of magnitude are separating the deaths that were attributed to COVID on the African continent
Yeah.
compared to Europe or the Americas. The Western developed nations, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, North America, United States, Canada, did a couple of orders of magnitude worse using all these pharmaceutical products.
Mm-hmm.
The nations in Africa didn't have the manufacturing capacity or the distribution networks or the money. And in many cases, they were arguing, oh, we didn't get enough of, drugs and jabs and tests and things like that. But yet their health was much, much, much better because a lot of people used natural remedies, whatever,
Absolutely.
was known to their local doctors that they used because they had to, they did better. So you would think that the WHO would send all of the experts to the nations in Africa saying, what did you do? We need to have everybody follow your lead.
Mm.
No, the European Commission, the United States, and all of the nations that essentially are where the pharmaceutical giants are based, Germany and so forth, they are pushing their agenda in opposition to the reality that the natural treatments worked better. But the natural treatments didn't make any money for the powers that be. And
Yes.
so the regulations set the stage, they set the foundation, they put in the definitions, they put in the declaration of an emergency, they put in the monetary flow. And so if we can get people to understand that this is the foundation for the other agreement, which confuses the daylights out of people because people get them all mixed up.
Yeah.
People can go to rejecttheamendments.com to learn about the amendments, but you can also go to rejectthetreaty.com to learn about the treaty. I've kept them separate because they're separate.
Thank you for that, James, because yeah,
What?
definitely that confusion kind of get a lot of people
Mhm.
mixed up. They talk about the IHR, next thing they're talking about the treaty. Yeah,
Right.
thank you for keeping them separate. Yeah.
And so the mental head game that has been going on with that got even worse this past May because the World Health Assembly adopted the pandemic agreement. But the pandemic agreement is not finished. They have not completed the negotiations. And they knew that. And so in the document that they agreed to, it says nobody can sign it until we finish negotiating it.
Yeah.
So they agreed to something that wasn't completely negotiated to make it, they didn't want to face their abject failure to complete the negotiations. So they made it
Yeah.
sound, and so now a lot of people think it's all said and done. But today that we're recording this, for me, it's Saturday, July the 12th. On the 9th and the 10th of this past week, they started up their next round of negotiations for the pandemic agreement, hoping to reach a final agreement by next May. So if people go to rejectthetreaty.com, you can now see what they have been working on secretly. You can see the agreement that they have put forth. And all you really need to do is read the table of contents. They want geographic distribution of the means of production for pharmaceutical products. They want billions of dollars to be spread, to build out that industry. And they want to be in control of regulating and approving those products. The WHO makes a lot of money doing that. And they want all of the nations to set up their approval process so that everybody's working, in lockstep. And they want to set up a global distribution and logistics network. Basically, if they say, oh, and this is another term that they use, we found a pathogen with
Mm.
pandemic potential. It doesn't mean people are dying. It's a pathogen that has potential. Well, I view that as, well, it's a pathogen with profitability potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they're negotiating is they want nations to actively seek out such pathogens, not because they're killing people, but because they might kill people. Okay?
Mm.
Send those to the coordinated laboratory network, share that, spread it around the world to all of the laboratories around the world, share it with corporations that can turn it into tests and drugs and jabs and gene altering therapies, whatever. Get the contracts in place to buy all of these products, put them into the storage depots so that when the Director General decides to declare an emergency, they'll have all of those products ready to treat a problem that, did they actually create the problem?
That they create. Oh
Okay.
my goodness.
Now, don't use any herbs or vitamins or minerals. Those are not relevant, okay? Because what they are essentially doing is the bidding of their donors and their relevant stakeholders. Well, of course, all of the people involved in these industries want this agreement to go through. It's not for the health of the people, it's for the transfer of wealth to certain people. And the stepping stone number one is to be aware and be clear on what they're doing. So I encourage people to, go to rejecttheamendments.com, rejectthetreaty.com. The reality is, for most people around the world, your national leader is not likely to write a letter in this next week to the WHO saying, no, thank you, not for us. Okay. Now, a number of years ago in 2022, a different batch of amendments were adopted. And if people listening don't know that, then you can see how deep the secrecy is. Because in 2022, amendments were adopted. 4 nations did reject those amendments. So it can be done. The Islamic Republic of Iran, Slovakia, the Netherlands, and New Zealand all sent a letter officially and rejected those amendments. So those amendments do not apply to those 4 nations. Now, it's, I do believe that some nations will reject these amendments. But the point is, we should all now be very much aware that your leaders, your government officials, your elected officials, your civil service or deep state, ongoing bureaucracy, have not bothered to ask you for your opinion. If you don't know that this is happening, if after years and years of negotiation, 1 week before the final deadline to reject it, you're just now learning about this, that means that your government clearly did not care about your opinion. They're doing what their relevant stakeholders want them to do, what the power brokers and the oligarchs and the foundations and all that. And so while it may be too late in any given nation to get your government to take that action, it's never too late to start getting informed, and it's never too late to voice your opposition to what they're doing. And so I think people have an obligation to speak up and write a letter to your prime minister or president or foreign minister or health minister or whomever and say, you have kept us in the secret for years, and we're just now learning a week before the deadline that, these could be rejected. We want you to reject them, and then find out whether or not they listen to you, or if they just brush you aside as an insignificant, concern, because they're listening to the people who have money and power. They're not listening to the people. And so it's not that the WHO is taking away your sovereignty. Your government officials are not listening to your voice. And these international corporations don't care about national boundaries. They don't care about sovereignty. They have gone over our heads, and they're putting in place the flow of money to build out their industry around the world. And so if anybody's learned anything from the last 4.5, 5.5 years, it's that the big pharma solutions did not help. They caused more harm than benefit. And doctors and healers around the world who used their experience and their wisdom and Mother Nature to treat people on an individual human-to-human basis saved a lot of lives. And to import Western pharmaceutical poison and have it transplant and push out a better solution, it's, you pick a word, it's evil, it's insane, it's greedy, it's all of those things. It doesn't make any sense unless you're looking at it from the point of view of profit. And that's what this is really all about. It's not the World Health Organization. They're just putting in documents that will transfer wealth from, people around the world to the pharmaceutical, hospital, emergency, industrial complex.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's a mouthful that you've shared with us there, James. And for me, listening to what you have just said, kind of puts a lot of clarity into the aspect pertaining to how what humanity should be celebrating is actually putting us in a deeper trap and therefore compromising us and compromising our future. Because when, for instance, you talk about the African experience as regards the COVID scenario, if you remember, James, at the time at which COVID was being announced and we're being told about this international health emergency and everything, there was a projection from the World Health Organization and other so-called experts to the extent that Africa, within the first 6 months, was going to register no less than 300,000 deaths. And throughout that entire experience, we didn't even reach half that figure. A continent of more than 1 billion people failed to reach that projection. And when they came now with the jab, they started jabbing people, vaccinate, vaccinate. Africa, again, the least vaccinated, so-called, of all the continents, and still the numbers do not match up. So I fully agree with you that if there was any honesty to this whole process, and this was about the health of the people and not profits to certain individuals and corporations, everyone should be running all over Africa asking the question, how did you do it? How did you survive this? Because if indeed you survived, therefore it means the answer lies here somewhere. Let's find that answer and replicate it in as far as the rest of the world is concerned. So now we are caught in a situation whereby if we don't wake up, we will find that we have replaced all the healing components of what we need within our healing systems, and we have relegated our naturopaths and our traditional healers to some little corner somewhere, and in the process we'll end up criminalizing them, because when the directives come or the suggestions from the World Health Organization, these governments jump up and all of a sudden it's law. And then those who take the natural route, which they like to refer to as the alternative route, I refuse to refer to traditional and natural as the alternative. The alternative is the allopathy. The alternative are all these mechanisms that are coming forth. They end up being criminalized. So definitely we need to find a way of how exactly we deal with this particular trap that we're running into, because the way I see it, in as far as the treaty and the IHR are separate processes, but they feed into each other. And it's necessary to find a mechanism by which we cripple them going forward, even if the 19th is literally on our doorstep. But we need to continue to find internal mechanisms within our countries, within the regional economic blocks of the continent, within the African Union, and also challenge the relevance of the African CDC. If all it does is follow what Big Pharma is doing and fail to basically protect our interests. So that is the position there I'm thinking of, James. So what would you say then as your proposed way forward? How do we protect ourselves going forward?
In my view, and if people disagree, that's fine. Step number one is always awareness.
Yes.
If you don't know something's going on, good or bad. If it's bad, you don't know to oppose it, and if it's good, you don't know to celebrate it. Okay,
Mm.
so awareness is number one, and so people just need to get that, put their attention on it and understand what it is. I've tried to make myself available to everybody. I always give out my phone number. I live in California. My phone number is 310-619-3055. You can put that in the show notes or whatever,
Yes.
put in the description. Um, I realize that, people around the world, you can send me a text message, you can call me directly, but you can also reach out on WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. I'm easy to find. You can, reach out in any way you want, because I realize people have questions and I'm happy to try to answer them. Step number two is not to try to convince people who have no idea what's going on, but to identify your allies. If you go to someone and you say, what do you think about the, amendments to the international health regulations? Everybody you ask is going to go, I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Mm.
There's no point in trying to convince them. Give them the information, let them become aware, and then they can be free to agree or disagree. They might work for big pharma and they might see a lot of dollar signs and they might think, oh, this is going to be great for business. Literally, one of the ways I got clarity on this was I was listening to the Indonesian health minister in, I think it was October of 2022, addressing the B20, the business leaders. Okay.
Mhm.
And he said, there's billions of dollars going into this pandemic industry. This
Oh
is a
my goodness.
this is a great money-making opportunity. Go invest. Okay.
Wow.
So if
Wow.
you're talking to someone who is of that mindset, if they make their living from pharmaceuticals, they're going to be all for this. So you identify your allies. You might talk to naturopaths and healers of all kind, um, to find out who is with you, and then you can decide the actions that you want to take. If you, as an individual, try to convince the administration or the powers that be, and it's you against all of them, you're going to get creamed. But
Yep.
if you build a group of allies and you have tens, hundreds, thousands, or more, when one person is faced with, look at all of these people who think differently, they
Yeah.
are far more likely, they're far more inclined to go, what's going on over there? There's all these people talking about this. I don't know anything about that. Tell me what you, then you have you outnumber the opponent on a 1 to 100 basis, as opposed to being outnumbered, you against the entire system.
Yeah.
It's awareness, allies, and then activism. If you try to push back before you have your team and your plan, it makes it seem so much harder. There's millions of us. We just need to get better organized, come together, be very clear on what they are trying to do, and be very clear on the fact that we don't want that. This is what we want. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Teams and teams of, healthcare practitioners around the continent, if you will, who understand, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do what we know works and doesn't cause any harm. It's
Mm.
not about the money, it's about people's health. And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
um, even though this, may be coming to people, just before a deadline, the battle is not going to end on July 19th. It's not going to be over. It's going to be an awareness raising moment where people who go, well, how come nobody told me?
Mm.
How come I'm only hearing about this now? Well, I've been screaming about it for 3.5 years, but your
Absolutely.
media and your government and the powers that be, your doctors, hospitals, they don't want you to know, because this is good for their business. They want it to go through. It's not good for your health. And they profit when you're not healthy, right? And so I think enough said about all of this. It's time for people to be aware that things are going on with the WHO that are probably not in your best interest.
No, thank you so much, James. I really appreciate that. I think together with what you've spoken to, I think this is also an opportunity for us within the context of our different countries to investigate the laws
Yes.
that also speak to our countries signing onto the
Hmm.
IHR. And we begin to challenge internally as well to see whether our governments have followed the national laws and the constitutions of our countries, and also to take it up even before the African court, where we feel that the African countries have failed us, and see how the African court will deal with it. And like you say, that the 19th is not the end of the road. We still have time. We still have time to fight. We still have time to also work in it as far as the treaty is concerned. So, James, I'd like to really, really give you a shout out. I've been following your work for years now, and I must confess, um, 90, if not 99% of what I know about how the World Health Organization is working against the people is through your Substack, is through the websites that you have recommended for people to look into. And we will continue relying upon your expertise. We will please make sure that we use the avenues that you've opened for us to get access to you, and also to invite you back as we go forward, because as the process leading up to their intended passing of the treaty next year continually unrolls, we'll need for you to keep us informed as to where it is now, where do we go from here, what is the process by which the people can come together. But definitely, the building of networks and strengthening of the alliances is absolutely critical. And it's one message that we will continue to also push, that we strengthen the alliances. And now we've got the Institute of Lawctivism, but together with the International Alliance of Lawctivism is this is the International Institute, and then we have the International Alliance of Lawctivism, where the lawyers and the activists come together, and we see how we channel this through. James, your closing words, my brother, and thank you so much for availing yourself.
Well, I've been saying for a couple of years that I really want to get out of the who and on with the new. And so people, we need to push back against what they're doing, but we also need to have a very clear vision of what is it that we want,
Yes.
and just go do that. You know,
Yes.
if you want to be healthy, if you want to use natural remedies and have doctors that care for you, and don't take orders from, medical establishment, you can do that now. And the more we do that, the more we build a new world of what it is that we want. The old world will fall away in time. So thanks for the opportunity, Sabella. Always good. Anytime, just let me know.
James, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, my brother. We'll keep you updated as well as to how we are proceeding here on the continent. And to you, the viewers, please, please make sure that you share this video as far and wide as you can, and subscribe, hit that notification button, so that all the time we share new content which speaks to Lawctivism, you will be the first one to know. And remember, in everything that you do, be the best that you were created to be. Thank you so much. James, thank you.
Thank you, Sabella.
Goodbye.